Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you, Zeus. You're here too. I am Lainey, L-A-N-I-E, and today, like the title says, we're going to be talking about the basics of diabetes. Should probably open my notes to the right page. Oh my gosh, I'm prepared. Are you scared of the thunder, Zeus? Oh, poor baby. Well, he's in my lap. That's about on brand. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about diabetes, the overall endocrine system, the pancreas. We're going to focus on type 1 diabetes, which brings us to our first point. There are two types of diabetes. So just lay down. There you go. That's a great spot for you. There are two types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. I have type 1. And I think type 2 diabetes is really the diabetes that we see most in the media, that most people are familiar with. Type 1 is associated with childhood, but that doesn't mean you only get type 1 if you are a child. And type 2 is usually associated with bad diet and lack of exercise per the media. However, I personally believe there's probably a large genetic component, and we have to look at other things like, are you living in a food desert? Are you able to exercise, safely? Do you have time between, let's say, multiple jobs and other things? So we'll talk a little more in depth on some of those issues and those considerations in a video specific to type 2 diabetes, where we're going to learn together. I obviously have firsthand experience with type 1, and like you, many of the information I know about type 2 comes from the media, so we're going to dive into some better sources, some deeper things, and I'll link some articles below for further research, as well as websites I used to investigate both diseases. So ultimately, both type 1 and type 2 deal with interrupting your pancreas function. This little ugly guy here. So I guess we should start with, what is even the point of this thing? So the pancreas is part of your endocrine system, and I'm just going to read this to you so I don't mess it up. The endocrine system is a collection of glands that produce hormones that can regulate metabolism, growth, and development. This can include tissue function, sexual function, reproduction, sleep, and mood, and then it says, and other things. So it does a lot. Kind of keeps those hormones in balance. So ultimately, diabetes affects the pancreas and throws those hormones off balance. We've got hormonal issues, and it's not because we were born female presenting. So here's the endocrine system. You can see it has many parts. You can see our friendly little pancreas is in there. And so there are two things that happen when the endocrine system has issues, like my pancreas does. The first thing is either you're underproducing or overproducing a hormone. So insulin is the hormone I do not produce, or I underproduce as a type 1 diabetic. It means essentially my pancreas is dead. Now, it's not scientifically 100% accurate, but in purposes of what the pancreas does for diabetes, it does not create insulin. So kind of an easy way to understand that is it doesn't work, it doesn't function, it's dead. That's usually what I tell people, because it's the simplest way to get that explanation across. The second thing that can happen when you have an endocrine issue, the development of a lesion or growth, like a nodule. This can be cancerous, but not necessarily is. Polycystic, nope, that's not it. Let's look it up. Polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS, which I also likely have. But it includes cysts on your ovaries. So, like I said, could be just an abnormal growth. Doesn't mean it's cancerous if you have a nodule. Just means that may be what's interrupting your hormone flow. So your human body is really good at detecting those hormonal imbalances and then triggering that feedback loop in your endocrine system to fixing them. That part of me that doesn't work in the pancreas to develop insulin really comes into effect to help regulate blood glucose, which if I didn't have diabetes, I wouldn't be monitoring as much. It's the glucose in your bloodstream a lot after you eat, and then sometimes with other hormonal releases like adrenaline can spike it. Sometimes exercise can create a glucose release into your bloodstream. So if I didn't have diabetes, my body would be like, oh hey, there's glucose on board, and tell my pancreas to make insulin. What that insulin then does is takes that glucose from the bloodstream and stores it in the cells for energy. So releasing it is a good thing when you need energy. Where it becomes a problem is if I have this excess glucose in my blood, but I don't have insulin created, that can really damage organs and other body parts if left untreated. So to counteract that, I give myself synthetic insulin. I particularly give Humalog. There are different types of insulin like Novolog, Afrezza, Apidra. These are all what's called short-acting insulins. There are also long-acting insulins. If I gave injections every day, I would do both, but I use a device, which is right here. So we'll show you. So I use this device. This is called an Omnipod pump. It's one of many options out there, and it delivers insulin in two ways. First, it's constantly dripping that short-acting insulin at different intervals, at different points in the day that my doctor and I have decided, and even changed, sometimes as frequently as changed every 3 months, to follow my lifestyle. If I'm more sedentary, I need less insulin. If I'm more active, maybe I need more. Reverse that. So for example, if I'm more sedentary, say in the winter months when it's harder to be outside, there's less opportunity for good weather. We're in Colorado, so it snows frequently enough and it's cold frequently enough where I may not be running as much. So I might need more insulin in that time since I'm not as active, because activity can help burn some of that glucose off. When I'm more active, say in the summer, the spring, into the fall, when I'm running a lot more, or when I'm working out more consistently, or hiking or camping and all those things that kind of come with the summer activity that hoping we can still do this year, then I need less insulin because my body's naturally burning off some of that glucose just by moving. So I can't take credit for any of those numbers. My doctor helps me. The other thing I do is I give insulin when I eat, because that baseline every hour drip insulin is really to just maintain an overall balance, which your pancreas will likely be doing if you're non-diabetic, but it can't necessarily equate or keep up with actively eating glucose. So if I eat something with carbohydrates is the biggest way to track glucose, then I will let it know I'm eating this many carbohydrates. It'll do its fancy math for me and give me more insulin to cover that extra glucose to help store it in my cells. So when you have an impossible sweater, when you have type 1 diabetes, your body attacks your own beta cells. For some reason, it doesn't see them as an integral part of your system, and the beta cell is really what produces that insulin. In the scientific community, we haven't quite figured out why that beta cell is attacked, what in genetic coding it's saying, kill the beta cell, it is the enemy of our body, when, I'd really like to have my beta cells around. That'd be I guess beggars can't be choosers. So I personally have had type 1 diabetes since I was 6 years old, which makes it 24 years now. I have done the array of systems, so I want to talk about systems in a separate episode so we could look at the different types. Not sponsored yet, but you know, hey Omnipod, Dexcom, I use you. I'm just saying. So before this gets too long, this educational series really look at diabetes, type 1 diabetes in specific, how it's different from type 2, and all the little nuances that come with it that I've lived throughout my life to help educate, and then how that can affect fitness. So I hope you learned something. You know, press a like if you're diabetic. Press a like if you know a diabetic. Press a like if you learned something. See you next time. Now I gotta go eat some cheese. And if you have a piece of cheese, go eat it too. Because life will be better. Okay, bye! Oh yeah, people are howling because it's 8. Are you scared, bunny? They don't like when people howl at 8. Anyone else in the country do this? It's so annoying.